Wicked cool. Feature alert.
Hey there, podcast fans. Thanks for listening. Now, you can also reach out and send me a text message. On every episode, at the top of the show notes, you'll see a link that says, send us a text message. Simply click it, write something super nice and sweet, and away we go. Also remember to please subscribe, share this podcast with a friend by telling them about it, and leave us a positive review, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, your favorite podcast streaming service, or even on our website at www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com.
It's the end of a long, long week. Rather than bury your sorrows in an all-night bender at the local dive bar, or worse, drinking alone, you settle on the couch, binge on Netflix, and then retire early. As you drift off, a rhythmic buzzing tingles across your body. Not in a comforting way. Soon you are paralyzed, and then you lift up to the ceiling. You look down at your comatose body, almost alien from this angle. Curiosity creeps into terror as you think, "Oh my God, I'm dead!" In a flash, you are back in your bed, inside your body. Now, freaked out and unable to sleep, you sneak downstairs and decide to have a few drinks after all. Suddenly, a brilliant white light blinds you as you see 3 short, uninvited house guests. You think, this bourbon is pretty darn good, before they escort you through the walls of your home and up into the sky, where a hovering spacecraft awaits you. On board, on a table, as they're about to probe you, you stare into the almond eyes of a gray alien being, who smirks with a thin slit for a mouth. "You should have gone bar hopping," he tells you telepathically. You telepathically respond, "You're right." Then your night is just about to begin.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
Preston Dennett is an author of books about out-of-body experiences, OBEs, the paranormal, and UFOs. Originally a skeptic with no interest or belief in the supernatural and the unexplained, Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and co-workers were having strange encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide array of paranormal phenomena. and had many out-of-body experiences himself. Preston is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal research, and the author of 28 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books have been Amazon UFO bestsellers. Preston has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and also the History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. His website is www.PrestonDennett, PrestonDennett.weebly.com, www.PrestonDennett.weebly.com.
All right, I'm here with Preston Dennett, and what an interesting guy. He is an author that's written over 28 books, over 100 articles covering the paranormal, UFOs, out-of-body experiences, and we hope to tackle all of that tonight. So, Preston, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
The first time I think I heard your name or heard you on a podcast was on Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert. And on the program I listened to, even though you're known more for UFOs, he talked a lot about out-of-body experiences. So I guess I first have to say, talking to Art Bell, I know he's passed, God rest his soul. That has to be on the bucket list of a lot of people in the paranormal field to talk to a legend like that. How was that experience for you?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I did a total of 3 shows with him over the years. And yeah, he's a champ. I think he had the most popular radio show in the world at one point.
And on that show in particular, he talked about out-of-body experiences. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely do, yeah. It was a lot of fun talking to him about it. He's like, oh, I'm scared to do it. I'm like, no, it's fun. Trust me.
When he mentioned that, I was thinking the same thing. I thought I would be kind of terrified to do an out-of-body experience because, the idea of letting go of my body, that little cord, and then just going off into the cosmos. So how would you, for an out-of-body experience, how did you get over that fear of just letting go? It's almost like jumping out of a plane, right, where you just have to have total trust and go with it. What was it like for you your first time?
Yeah, the first time was amazing. I was super excited. This was something I deliberately, sought out. I'd read Robert Monroe's book, and he's huge on out-of-body experiences, really popularized it, and gave exercises on how to do it. And I thought, wow, this does sound scary, but if someone can do this, it'd be awesome. And it took me about 2 months of doing the exercises, which are sort of, meditation, visualizations, relaxation, that sort of thing. And it worked. The first time was so much fun. I felt the vibration. It's called the vibratory state. And he said it's like a mild electric shock. It wasn't mild at all. It was actually really a strong electric shock, for me at least. Threw me right out of my body. And so that was a little scary at first. But once I was out, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It's real. I can't believe this. I got pulled right back in and did it again. Second time, same thing. The third time was scary. It was terrifying. I woke up in the middle of the night, standing next to my bed. Yeah. And I'm like, what is going on? I felt a little disoriented. It was dark, of course, and I was a little bit dizzy. And I kind of gathered my wits and I looked down in my bed. And there I was, sleeping in bed. And I thought, oh, crap, I'm dead. I'm dead.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. When that happens, how did it happen? You weren't trying to do it. You just did it in your sleep. Is that what kind of scared you, that you were able to do it in your sleep and you didn't even realize that you could do that?
Yeah, it turned out that's not uncommon, especially when you're a beginner. You don't necessarily remember going out or even coming back in sometimes. You'll just wake up and you're already out of body. It's much more difficult to just do it consciously while you're lying there or, sitting or whatever.
That third time when it was terrifying and you're looking at your body and you're kind of standing there, so did you feel your body? Did you think you had a body, or what did you feel like? So right now we're in air, right? And we've got this big
clunky body that we're in, that some of us are very comfortable in it, some of us it feels kind of clunky. What did it feel like in your out-of-body persona when you were looking at yourself in bed? You even remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. You can feel the air. You can feel the cool air. It feels largely normal, really, except you do feel light. You feel almost weightless. And in fact, you can fly. You can walk through walls. You can do all kinds of things, which feels really weird, especially in the beginning, to walk through a wall. I mean, it's almost indescribable. But initially, when that happened, that third experience, I'm like, oh, I'm dead. I felt horror, just this cold dread. And I dived right back into my body. And it felt really strange to sort of fill it up like a glass of water almost. It's like hard to describe, but you sort of fill up your body again and wiggle into it, like putting on clothes, kind of.
Wow. It almost sounds like it's like a test flight for actually death and the transcendence that happens with death, where you leave your body behind and you're looking down at yourself, like those near-death experiences that people have. Do you think when the time comes, it'll be something similar like that, except you can't go back to your body? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure of it because, I've read a lot on near-death experiences and for out-of-body experiences as well. But yeah, I've gone through the tunnel of light that near-death experiencers talk about. You can go to the other side. You can do all kinds of things. You can appear in front of people who are awake and alive, and they don't see you, or usually they don't. It took me years before someone finally did see me.
Who saw you?
It turned out she's a medium. She's pretty psychic. She's a contactee.
Okay.
And she had out-of-body experiences, and I got to know her pretty well. And I thought, well, let's give it a try. Because you can go visit people, if you want. You just kind of set that intention. You pop out of your body. You're like, okay, what do I want to do? So I'm like, let's go see Dolly. She lives in Florida. I'm like, well, this is far away. I'm here in California. But you can travel long distances in the blink of an eye. You kind of just set the intention and boom, you teleport there.
Now, is it only in the present? Can you go in the past or in the future too? Or when you're doing this, at least when you're alive, is it only in the present that you can go to places?
If you get good at it, yeah, you can start to do that sort of thing. And I've only done it that's a couple of times. I've tried to go into the past, not too successfully. Dolly helped me along, actually. She's really good at it.
Oh.
But I went to her house and I'm like, I wonder if this is it. There was a guy in her garage just sitting there. And I walked up to him and he could see me. So I'm like, oh, who are you? He says, my name is Henry. And I'm like, I'm looking for Dolly. And he points to the doorway and Dolly's walking in. She turns around and sees me. She's on the phone. I can see she's on her cell phone. And she's staring right at me. And she's looking at me and she says, I can't talk now. I'm being robbed.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that was my reaction. And that pulled me right back into my body because any surprise or any strong emotion pulls you back in. But she calls me the next day. We talk pretty much daily. I'm writing a book about her experiences, actually. And, she didn't mention she was robbed. So I'm like, well, maybe I made this up. It was a dream. I don't know what's going on. I was sure I saw her. She's like, oh, I saw you last night. I'm like, you did? She's like, yeah. I walked into the garage. And I'm like, there's a guy in your garage, by the way. She's like, what's his name? Henry. She's like, oh, that was a guy who passed away.
Oh, wow. So you can see ghosts when you get out of your body? You can actually see ghosts? Is that what happened?
Yep. But she said she saw me. And I'm like, well, what did you say? Because I heard you say something. I didn't want to say it, because I wanted verification. And she's like, oh, I said, I'm on the phone with Rob. I said, I can't talk now. I'm on the phone with Rob. I'm like, oh, because I thought she said I'm being robbed.
Oh, right.
So I kind of misunderstood her, but it was enough confirmation for me to say, she did see me. I mean, she looked right at me.
Is this something, Preston, that you do a lot still, or did you just kind of go through a phase and you did it and you stopped doing it, or what? How often do you have these OBEs now?
Well, it began right around the same time I started investigating UFOs, which is kind of weird, and it would come in waves. I'd get a bunch of them. I used to do it like once a week, on weekends when I'd sleep late, and then there'd be a wave where it would just happen a lot. And then I went for years, really, without doing it at all. Just got kind of caught up in the world, but then it would come roaring back, and boom, boom, boom. You're having all like lately. I've been doing quite a bit of it.
Now, I know you're writing, we'll talk about some of your books, but talk about Dolly and maybe tease the book that you're working on and when it's going to come out. Well, interesting. Talk about this person that affected you with OBEs and maybe, I guess, the paranormal too.
Yeah, she contacted me because she was led to me by her ET contacts. She was looking for someone to tell her story. So that was cool. She is what I would call a conscious contactee. A lot of people have missing time, and I'd say most people do. There's a few who, are well known for being fully conscious during their encounters, and she is absolutely one of them. Since age 14, she's been having
14, really?
Yeah, since age 14.
Oh, since age. Okay, so how old is she now? Sorry, Mom.
No, she's in her 60s now.
Okay, all right.
But she was having lots of missing time experiences as a young girl, and getting visited in her bedroom by ETs, which is the pattern I've heard from a lot of people. But at age 14, she had a missing time encounter and said, "That's it. I want to remember what happened," and she did.
Is there other people in her family that it happened to as well? Because sometimes it goes back generations, right? Was she the only one, or is there other people in her family as well that abductions happened to?
Yeah, it happened to her father. I think it does track families, and that's true in her case. Probably her brother, but he didn't want to talk about it, and he's now passed away, so we'll never really know.
Unless you go back in time, right? Jeez, you might. Yeah, give us a little tease of it. What's it called? Is it about? Is it mostly about OBEs or about the extraterrestrial kind of encounter that she had? What type of impact has she had in your life? And I had many questions on this. I apologize, but when do you think the book will be ready? I know you're a prolific writer, and when do you think it'll be ready in 2022?
Yeah, I'm about halfway through, so I'm thinking early 2022. I really want to get it out as soon as possible. It's an amazing story. Talked to a lot of people, and she's the first one who really has a whole continuous narrative. She's in contact with Greys.
Yeah.
It's very benevolent for her. They've healed her. They've taught her how to fly the craft. They've taken her to all kinds of places, shown her all kinds of stuff. That's really an incredible story. I mean, she's been taken on board to other planets, been participated when other people are being taken on board to be physically examined. She's seen animals in kind of like, I guess you'd call them alien zoos. They don't call them that.
Greys. So you hear about greys, you think they're almost like, less sentient than other, aliens that you hear about. From her experience, the greys are warm and are good teachers to her and a very positive interaction.
Yeah, 100%. She says there's different kinds. There's little AI.
Yeah,
sort of
that's what I kind of envision is kind of almost an AI form of alien. It's just they're there to collect the samples, or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, and they're less emotional, and I think that's what a lot of people see and get sort of an impression that these guys have no emotions. But Dolly says no, that's absolutely not true, and the Greys are not hostile. They're not trying to take over. They're not trying to hurt anybody or scare anybody. They have a mission to sort of wake people up psychically. They really want us to sort of grab hold of our autonomy and really raise our awareness and start using our psychic abilities so that we can communicate with them. That is one of their major missions.
I'm going to go into a couple things in UFOs in a second. I just want to go back one thing in that Art Bell interview. You're right. He was terrified to leave his body. He had one experience and he woke up in a hotel or something and he went right back into his body. He mentioned John Lear about saying, "Don't go into the light. It's the devil trying to trick you into the gates of hell." I heard that too, and I think I also heard somewhere that maybe Whitley Strieber had said that to Art Bell too at some point. What was your reaction when he said that, and have you had any thought about after the show about, is that true or not?
Yeah, that one kind of took me by surprise when he said it. I started thinking about it and experimenting, because when you go to the other side, and there is another side, and there are different levels. There are levels that are much darker, very much like Earth. And the higher you go, the higher the vibration. It's made of light. You cannot avoid the light. That's ridiculous. I don't believe that for a second.
Good. That's not the terrifying thing. I don't want to be that one guy. I was in a fraternity, and you had to go through initiation. You had to go through this test at the end. I'd hate to fail the test when I'm in the afterlife because I listened to John Lear. So, okay, it's good to know.
No, it's just not true. I mean, near-death experiencers talk about going into the light, and it's beautiful, and it's all their questions are answered. And I've done it. You can go into this source, I guess you would call it. Some people think it's God. I'm not really a religious guy, but I can see why they would think that because it feels that way. It is like nirvana. It's almost indescribable how wonderful it is. No, go towards the light. It's fine.
You know what it reminded me of? I don't know if you remember, if I'm older than you, but it reminded me of that Twilight Zone series episode, To Serve Man. Do you remember that classic series where it's like, they're trying to decode, there's this book, that the aliens have. They're helping out mankind, but they have this book. It's called To Serve Man, and they think it's some Bible. It turns out to be a cookbook at the very end, So I was like, oh, God, is that it? So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of your books, like one of your books is about healing, healing with extraterrestrials. So there is obviously, I think a lot of your interactions have been positive. So let's actually talk about that for a little bit. There's a book you wrote about UFO healings, true accounts of people healed by extraterrestrials. Can you talk about some of the stories in that?
Yeah, that was actually the first book I wrote, and it had 100 cases. I put out a new edition called The Healing Power of UFOs, which has 300 cases.
Wow.
And I came into this field in 1986, and I was horrified. I'm like, this is bad news. Earth is being invaded by aliens. No one's talking about it. There's a cover-up. They're experimenting on people. They're being kidnapped against their will. This is not good. But I sort of reversed my opinions on that because I started to really look at these cases objectively, and I started to read about a lot of healing cases. I mean, there was a couple of police officers driving along, and they were struck by a beam of light, and one of them was healed of a flesh wound on his finger. And another case in France where a guy was healed of an axe wound on his foot and paralysis. Another guy in Peru healed of rheumatism and nearsightedness. And so those cases were like bouncing around in the literature, and I thought they were super rare until I interviewed this lady who told me personally that she was healed. She had a cyst in her fallopian tubes, and it was causing her all kinds of problems. It was tested on the MRI, fully verified. And the night before surgery, she had an encounter, and apparently the cyst was removed because she went to the doctors the next day, and they're like, you had surgery, which she denied it. They're like, we know you're lying. Your cyst is gone. There's fluid here in your fallopian tubes. It's only present if you've had surgery. There's laser scars here on your abdomen. What's going on? You had surgery. But no, I didn't. She did not want to tell them. And so I started digging into other cases, and I found a lot. And this is actually a major, what I call a sign, or one of the things that happens when people are taken on board. It's not uncommon. Bud Hopkins has cases. David Jacobs, John Mack, all of the major researchers have them. Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith, Edith Fiore. This is one of the main agendas by ETs, is healing humanity.
Now, is it the Greys, or in your book where you wrote, was it different types of aliens that you captured, or was it predominantly the Greys, or were there other types of alien species as well?
Yep, mostly Greys, which was actually kind of shocking to me. And I realized there's sort of a false alien threat narrative being put forth in the media, which, fear sells and makes a good story. I get it. People who have a scary experience are maybe more likely to seek help, whereas someone who is healed is probably going to keep quiet. So I think that's one of the reasons why this was sort of put on the back burner and relegated to the fringe. But absolutely, it is a consistent feature. And I've got cases of not only flesh wounds, but people cured of back pain, people cured of vision problems, glaucoma, nearsightedness, farsightedness, torn cornea, stomach aches, flus, cold.
Wow. Is there like a prayer to summon aliens if you're sick? Like you go to see, John of God or whoever in Brazil, and do they just come to you, or do people ever summon them, or do they just visit them because they know that there's something wrong with them?
I would say about 50% of the cases are people who already have a history of contact. So that's definitely a factor. It's definitely all over the world, and it stretches back 100 years. I mean, I've got really old cases. They occur to men and women. It's no relation to blood type or sex or politics or religion or education. And I would say about 5 to 8% of the cases are people who asked for a healing and received it.
Huh.
It's pretty rare, but it does happen. There was one lady who had total renal failure. And as far as I know, she did not have a history of encounters. She was praying to God for healing and actually called her friends, her family, her coworkers, her boss, everyone, like, pray for me, pray for me. I'm having renal failure. The doctor told her this, like, go to the emergency room right away. And she went home to tell everyone what was happening and ended up falling asleep on her bed, after praying, and woke up. And there's these short figures around her bed, which were not grays. They weren't human looking. They weren't praying mantis. They were these sort of short, brownish skin, round bodies. And they were massaging her abdomen. She was going in and out of consciousness, woke up the next morning and was able to go to the bathroom, went to the doctor. He completely freaked out. He's like, I don't know what to tell you. I thought you were in total kidney failure. So she asked for healing and received it. She told everyone it was angels until about this is really interesting, this little end note to this case.
Yep.
It was about 2 months later, she's taken on board. It's classic sort of onboard UFO encounter where she described the round room, the table, the indirect lighting, the things, we hear quite often. And there were these figures. And they laid her down on the table and they put this instrument over her, which I've heard described many times. And it's sort of this flat-like tray, which displays your organs in sort of 3D holographic full living color.
Wow.
And they're like, here's your kidneys. Your kidneys look great, don't they? And she's like, yeah, they do. And they said, well, here's your liver. Do you see all these black spots? And there were all these black spots on her liver. She's like, yes, I see that. And they said, your liver is unhealthy. This is because you are drinking too much Diet Coke. You need to stop drinking Diet Coke.
Do a lot of these alien visits start with a light? Because I bring this up, Preston, because I'm trying to debunk that John Lear thing, and I'm wondering if someone says don't go into the light, was it almost rather an alien abduction where they see a light, next thing they know, they see something that they mistake for an alien, they could think it's a demon or something. And when I heard that on the Art Bell show, that was kind of running through my mind is, maybe there was an alien encounter which kind of scared them, and that's why they feel not to go into the light. So when people have encounters, is there light that they see first, or what is their first encounter with an alien? Is it in their bedroom? Is it out in the woods like Travis? Is it Travis Walton, or what is the first sign of an alien abduction usually?
Yeah, well, it can happen anywhere. I will say that. I mean, I've got cases in hotel rooms and out in the city, places you would never expect. The most common place for a person to see an ET and be taken on board is from their bedroom. And yes, it often happens where the room will fill with light. And this can be from a beam of light coming down from a craft or from the room itself just filling up with light, and the ETs are sort of beaming into the room. In many cases, they are pulled up by a beam of light or sort of like pulled into the craft interdimensionally would be the best way to describe it. Don't avoid light. The universe is made of light. That's what matter is. Matter itself is electromagnetics.
Yeah.
It is light. And if you are on the other side, you are surrounded by light. You will not be able to avoid it unless you go to the lower realms, which are much darker, very much Earth-like. In the higher realm, you are embraced by the light. I think that might, and I hate to say it, be disinformation, because other stuff John Lear says I don't agree with either, which is that the Greys have made a deal with our government, giving technology in exchange for the permission to abduct people. And Dolly says flat out no, that it did not happen.
Right.
And I don't have any direct evidence of that. So I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, I don't think that the light is something people should avoid by any means. I know an encounter can be very scary. I mean, when your room fills with light and you've got these, short beings with gray skin and their huge eyes, and they're like, don't be afraid, come with us. People, often their first reaction is abject terror.
Sure. So let's go back. We're going to talk about some of your other books, but you started investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when you discovered family and friends had several unexplained encounters. So bring us back to 1986, who you were then. Maybe I assume you might have been a skeptic or never thought about it, and what opened your eyes and brought you on the path to where you are today.
Yeah, I was a profound skeptic. Did not believe in it. Was ready to tell you you were a liar. You were either hoaxing, hallucinating, or misperceiving, which is really the Air Force tagline. That's what they would tell you. And they knew fully well it was real. So yeah, I was skeptical, very scientifically minded. I mean, I was into biology and chemistry and astronomy. I was very science-based. I thought science was the answer. And I got an incredible shock. November 1986. I had heard of UFOs. I remember watching In Search Of. And I'm like, these people are lying. Every now and then you'd hear about it, but it wasn't like it is today at all. And this report came in the news about a sighting over Alaska. It's now a very well-known case. A Japanese airliner sort of was followed by a UFO for many miles. It was on their radar. There was ground witnesses, ground radar. It's a great case.
Yeah.
But when it came on the news, it was maybe a minute long. And honestly, they just showed the pilot, says, hey, this guy thinks he saw a UFO. Ha ha ha. Have you ever seen one? No. Ha ha. They joke, laugh nervously, and move on. And gave no real information. But I remember my brother Mark, some years earlier, like 7 years earlier, had come running to the house, like, I saw a UFO. And I'm like, shut up, Mark, go away. And so I asked him about it, and he described this really incredible encounter, with a classic saucer, a dome on top, colored lights. I'm like, Mark, you're kidding me. He's like, no, it was at treetop level, totally quiet. We chased it in our car. I'm like, we? It's like, yeah, Phil and Greg, my friends, you know them. You want to talk to them? You don't believe me? Talk to them. I'm like, all right, I'll talk to them. I knew who they were, and they gave the same story. And that's how it kind of started, and I started asking, boy, that was a mistake. I regretted it because my sister-in-law had a sighting. She saw Greys, face to face. I had people at work who had seen UFOs. One had a missing time. I had several friends who had seen UFOs close up. Another had missing time.
Was it hard for them, Preston, to talk about it? Did you have to pull it out of them? Or how did they look at you when you brought up the topic? Were they suspicious, thought you'd laugh at them, or did they open up right away?
My brother was very eager to talk. But yeah, they were all, why do you want to know? And I'm like, no, seriously, I'm interested. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me? He said, you wouldn't have believed me. You didn't believe in this stuff. I'm like, I know, but if it's real, you should have told me. I was upset. I could not believe it. I went straight to the bookstores and the libraries. I'm checking out books. I'm like, oh my God, this is real. I was thinking, I'm going to prove it's swamp gas. These guys have got to be crazy. I knew they weren't. These were people I loved and trusted. I'd known them for years. I knew they weren't lying. But it was hard to wrap my head around. I ended up, buying 50 books and started interviewing people formally. I joined MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, became a field investigator. This was all in the space of just a couple of years. I was obsessed. I needed to find out what the heck was going on.
Now, you also went into the paranormal as well. Are they related, the paranormal and UFOs, or were they just separate interests for you?
I think they're related. I found that out pretty early on. I remember I was interviewing a family friend, Sylvia Walters, who had seen a UFO. She's a pilot, a flight instructor, trained scuba diver, a good witness. And she had someone with her when she saw a UFO. That was another thing that shocked me. I always assume people who see UFOs are alone, they're uneducated, they're out in the wilderness, they're crazy. No, that wasn't true at all. And she's like, describes her UFO encounter. She says, I also saw a ghost, in case you're interested. I'm like, oh no, really? What? And I had actually seen my own ghost. Following the death of my mother, I saw her as an apparition. And I didn't think ghosts at the time. I do now, but at the time I'm like, I am going out of my mind.
Was that before 1986 or after?
That was before. So that was the first, one of the first real weird paranormal events that kind of started having me scratch my head. So I started interviewing people, and I would leave, the questions open-ended, anything unexplained. And often they would describe a near-death experience or a dream that came true or just a wide variety of paranormal events. And I remember the one that really just knocked me over was when this radiologist from Canyon Country was interviewing him about a UFO that had landed in his backyard. And this is a pretty rural area. It overlooks the LA National Forest. And so he's describing this, colored lights. They came down and took off. It was a pretty quick thing. And he's like, then the very next night, and I think this is related, he said, I had a Bigfoot encounter. A Bigfoot appeared in the same place. And I kind of like groaned because I'm like, I'd started to hear about Bigfoot and I'm like, I'm not going there. What if Bigfoot is real? I don't want to know. This is a can of worms. I just was afraid to sort of look into it.
Yeah, you hear that hypothesis a lot, that Bigfoot is kind of an interdimensional being, right, or animal that can slip in and out. Several people I've heard of, something you see on TV talk about, they're tracking Bigfoot and then he just disappears. They see something and then he's gone, like he just slipped into nothing. So there is that hypothesis out there. And I think that hypothesis about Bigfoot is, the guy who does, is it Pallades? I forget his David Pallades or something. The guy who does Missing 411. He never comes out and says what's causing the missing people, but it's almost kind of implied a little bit that could have something to do with it. I mean, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I talked to him personally, actually.
Oh, wow, great.
Yeah, David Pallades.
Okay.
Interesting guy, and I think he's doing some really good, thorough sort of empirical research. There's a lot of people out there speculating, and they've got their theories, and they're trying to prove it, and forcing the evidence to fit their theory. And he's not that way, so I like his research. I think there might be a connection. I am not so sure that Bigfoot is responsible for all the missing people. It could be... I suspect it's a number of different causes, everything from interdimensional time slips to, human trafficking, to UFOs, to reptilians, to Bigfoot, to people getting lost. I don't know. I did talk to one contactee from Maine, and she was in contact with Grays, who gave her all kinds of really interesting information. And, they told her, you need to stop putting out the greed and negativity you're putting out. You're going to destroy your planet like we did. We've been genetically altering humans for millennia, including dogs and cats. We've altered their DNA to make them more emotionally intelligent so that they can relate to humans better. They told her all kinds of stuff. There's going to be a bunch of disasters coming up that will make Hurricane Katrina look like, just a little storm, which turned out to be true. And
yeah,
they told her, if people should start disappearing from this planet, it's being done by us for the universal good.
Huh.
Yeah, we know people who have disappeared. A lot of pilots have disappeared going, intercepting UFOs.
Yeah. That sounds like another book, right? Is that on your list? You must have a short list of books that you want to write and topics of the...
Yeah, that would be a great idea I actually do have a case where someone was essentially invited on board and he did not come back. Yeah, this was in my book, Onboarding UFO Encounters. A really interesting case involving a group of 6 or 7 young men. They were 19, 20, 21, 22, and go out into the cabin, one of their cabins up in the high desert here in Southern California, on weekends, and just drink beers and hang out and have fun. And one of the guys, his name was Paul, that is his real name, was out there and says, I'm going to go take a walk. And he didn't come back for hours. And they're starting to think something's wrong when he shows up and says, you're not going to believe it. I came upon a landed UFO. They invited me on board. They were largely human looking, white jumpsuits, large eyes, bald heads, but looked human. So they were studying this area. They invited him to go with them. And he's like, really? And they said, yes, you can go with us, but you can't come back. And he said, no, I'm not ready to do that. And they said, well, we're going to be back here next year around this time, on this day, actually. And they said, if you want, we will be here. And if you want to come with us, you can. And long story short, a year rolls around and he gives all his stuff away.
Wow.
And the guy I interviewed was one of the guys in this group. His name is Tony. Are you going? Are you planning on going with those guys? And Paul's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to go see if they're there. Paul drives up there and doesn't come back. And so Tony, the friends, and Paul's parents drive up there and find his car. And the keys are in it. And Paul is gone. It's a missing persons case. The police are called. They're all questioned. Tony talked to the police. The police are like, what do you know? And Paul told him the story, the UFO story.
And he's a murder
And,
suspect. Probably after that, right? It's like,
not in this case, thankfully.
all right, good.
There were a lot of witnesses. Well, that did happen with Travis Walton. He was returned, though.
Yeah, they thought he was. They thought they had killed him too. Yeah, I remember that. Let's get to so we don't overlook it. Your latest book, Wondrous 25 True UFO Encounters. That's your latest book, correct?
That's right. That was just out in May.
All right. You want to tell us kind of what inspired this book, what makes it unique from some of your others, and tease out one of your favorite stories from that book?
Yeah, I love this book, actually, because it's all first-hand original cases, never before published, which I've written a bunch of books, and some do draw on a wide net of research, like Schoolyard Encounters, which is about UFOs hovering and landing next to schools. These are all brand new cases with a wide variety, actually. My book, Onboard Encounters, was all about people who've taken on board. This one has got some really interesting sightings where people had telepathic contact, some crazy UFO landing cases, a really interesting USO case, unidentified submersible object, an object that comes out of the ocean, onboard encounters, some government whistleblower cases. I think one of my favorite, it's such an interesting case. The lady contacted me. She had read an account in one of my other books, which was very similar to what she had seen.
Yeah, how's that book doing? Is it? I saw one of your books on Amazon. One of your books has like 425 reviews. I think it was UFO Healings, True Accounts. That's one. But also, I think Onboard UFO Encounters. Is that one of your most popular books besides this one?
Yeah, it's definitely my most popular, which I can see why. It's got some amazing stories. But this other one is doing really well. It's an Amazon bestseller. It reached number 2.
That's great.
So, yeah, I think my favorite story in this is about this lady named Ellen. Well, I call her Eleanor. That's not her real name. She's a daycare worker, a teacher, loves to go jogging outside her home. And it was in 2006 when she wakes up at 4:30 a.m. and goes jogging outside her home with her dog. And this is in O'Fallon, Illinois. So it's dark. She's jogging a couple of streets near her home, comes upon a street called Kyle Avenue. And it's a T intersection. She's approaching Kyle Avenue, and she sees something walking down the middle of the road. And her dog sees it first. The dog stops and looks up, and she's thinking it's going to be a deer. It's going to be a fox, a raccoon, because that would often happen at that hour. And this is a very rural area. And it wasn't anything like that. She thought it was a man on stilts with extenders on his arm.
Wow, that's freaky.
And it walks under the streetlight. So this streetlight is 15 feet tall, and it's coming right up to the streetlight. So she knows that this thing was about 15 feet tall. And she says when it came under the light there, she could see it clearly, and it was a praying mantis.
Oh, jeez.
Triangular head, eyes the size of basketballs, very skinny legs, skinny gray body, dark, making 6-foot strides. Its head was down, kind of scanning the road, and its arms are sort of pumping up and down as it's walking really fast down the middle of the road at 4:30 a.m. Crazy. And so what does she do? She chases it. She runs after this thing. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I probably would have turned around.
Oh, yeah.
And ran home. She says, she considered it, but she was just so curious because she couldn't believe her eyes. And so she runs up to the intersection, and this thing is booking it down the road and is already a couple of 100 feet down the road when it turns off into the cornfield there and is gone. She runs up and looks for it. Says, can't see it. Like, is there anything in this area? I mean, like, what is going on? What would a 15-foot tall praying mantis humanoid be doing walking down your road? She says, I have no idea. There's cornfields. There's a high school. She says, there is one thing. I live about 6 miles away from Scott Air Force Base.
Huh.
And that rang alarm bells in my head because I think it was 6 years earlier, the year 2000 or so, that there was a huge sighting over Scott Air Force Base. Well, right north, exactly where she lives. A bunch of police officers saw this UFO tracking it all across central Illinois there. So I don't know if that's related or not. This was also right after the Chicago O'Hare airport sighting, which was just a couple 100 miles away.
Can you shed light on that? Because that's kind of an amazing one. That's almost irrefutable. Can you just share for our listeners kind of what happened on the Chicago O'Hare event?
Yeah, I love this case. There's a lot of cases of UFOs hovering over airports. It's a thing. Considering doing a whole little study on that. But the Chicago O'Hare Airport in 2006, this UFO appeared over one of the towers, one of the watchtowers. And it was seen by people in another watchtower. It was seen by pilots. It was seen by baggage handlers. It was seen by people on the ground, people in planes. It was photographed. The entire incident was covered up initially. This object hovered for 10, 15 minutes and then zoomed upwards into this very dense, low cloud layer and punched a hole right through it.
Wow.
So it's a great case, and the airport officials tried to cover it up, told the employees not to talk about it. It leaked out. I think one of the baggage handlers started talking about it, and a mainstream journalist got a hold of this story and started talking to the airport officials, who denied it completely. And then he was able to get the witnesses to talk, and eventually, we got actual audio tapes of the airport employees talking about this thing as they're watching it. So it almost did not come out, and makes me think there's a lot of cases like this that we never hear about. This one we did. It's a great case.
Yeah, your book had kind of good timing. It came out in May, and then in June, the UAP Pentagon report came out. What was your thought about that when that report came out? I know it was a little bit underwhelming, but it did kind of at least point that, I forget, like 95% or 99% of the incidents were unexplained. They just weren't going to tell you what it was. What was your reaction when that report came out?
Yeah, I'm kind of two minds about it, because I've been in this field for a long time, and there's been no official movement, no word from any governmental body at all. UFOs are not real. Shut up. That was all they would say. We don't handle UFO reports. Go away.
Yeah.
When I heard about this report and Pentagon started talking about pilot sightings, and I'm like, well, this is interesting. I kind of knew there wasn't going to be much to it, and that turned out to be true. It turned out to be, 6 pages of really mostly lies. Like, we're studying 144 reports. We think, well, one's a balloon. We think it might be China or Russia, or maybe it's even us. Wait, us? Don't you know if it's you or not? I mean, that was ridiculous. And they used the word extraterrestrial, I think, once.
Yeah.
So it was a bust. It was just, they have much better evidence. They have the craft. They have the bodies. So from an investigator standpoint, from anyone who's been in this field for any time, there wasn't much to it. But on the other hand, it was a huge, huge step, because they did actually say that it could be aliens. It woke up a lot of people. It pushed this onto 60 Minutes, onto the mainstream news daily.
Yeah.
It is now being discussed in government, seriously. I mean, there's the Gillibrand Amendment, Kirsten, I don't know how you pronounce her name, Gillibrand. And the Pentagon is forming a task force. And
yeah. There's another thing, too, by the way. I interviewed a guy named Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb.
Oh, yeah.
He started the Galileo Project. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is a group of people that are, they're saying, well, you know what, don't leave it up to the government. Science should be monitoring the skies. So it's like a network of cameras that they're building a project to canvass the skies, and that way they figure if they get a high-res image, they'll know if it's made in China or made in whatever planet, So that's the thought behind it. But yeah, that's actually happening right now. Actually, how they're rolling that out. I think that's one good thing that came out of that report.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Honestly, don't think our government will ever fully disclose. Certainly not willingly. I don't think they're doing it willingly now. The only reason they're doing it is a couple of reasons. These really good footage was being leaked out by whistleblowers. And if they do not disclose, they will lose all credibility and all control over people's perception of this subject. So they were painted into a corner. They had to do it for their own. It's not for our own good. When have they ever done anything for our own? They have lied from day one on this subject. Their record on this is heinous. It's terrible. I don't trust them. Not with this subject. I don't trust them one bit. If they're going to disclose, it's going to be done kicking and screaming the whole way.
Yeah, the good thing about the Galileo project is the government can't say you can't look up into the sky, right? That's like open, so they can actually try to track that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, too big to cover up. Can't cover up the sky.
And Preston, one of the other books you mentioned, speaking about UFOs, was Schoolyard Encounters. Can you talk about that book? I think you released that about a year ago before this current one.
Yeah, I love this book because it hit me like a ton of bricks. There's a very famous case in Rua, Zimbabwe at Ariel Elementary School where a UFO landed.
Yep.
Next to the school. I mean, some 200 students were on the playground. I think at least 60 of them saw it. A bunch saw ETs. They communicated with some of the children. It's a fantastic case. And when I heard about it, I instantly thought of the case in Melbourne, Australia, in 1966, in which a UFO, again, landed next to the school. And some 300-400 people saw it, kids and teachers. And I'm like, wonder if this is a thing. I started doing research into it, and I found there was another famous case, Crestview Elementary School in Opelika, Florida. That was 1 year later, 1967. As I dug deeper, I found over 100 cases. So this is absolutely something they're doing. They are targeting schools. They're showing themselves to kids on purpose. In 1/3 of these cases, they're actually landing or humanoids are seen. This is absolutely one of their agendas to sort of publicize their presence by showing themselves to school children. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I want to talk about where we can get your book. So I just think Amazon is probably one place, and we'll put it in the show notes as well. I just have a couple questions first before we do that. One is aliens. You talked about what are the different types from your experience of aliens that there are that you've heard about from your books, and have you ever had a UFO experience?
Yeah, there's many different types. And I do think we're dealing with aliens, by the way. There are some people who think, they're time travelers, they're interdimensional. It's a phenomena that wears different masks. No, it's my assessment we're dealing with ETs, people like us from other planets. And what I get is mostly grays or some variation of what we would think of as grays, 50, 60%. But praying mantis is another major type, human looking. They look just like us. That raises serious questions about who we are, where we came from, and our relationship to these guys. Another category would be just strange humanoids, beings that really you can't categorize as almost unique. Everything from 8 to 9 foot tall humanoids with large eyes, but largely human looking, to short, hairy dwarves and all manner of humanoids, blue skinned, sort of troll like beings, light beings, tall whites. I'm going to say there's probably an infinite number of types out there. It's a huge universe.
What about reptilians? You hear a lot of that's kind of the one that you hear about, like as the nasty version. What have you heard about reptilian aliens?
Yeah, that does come up. I don't personally have a whole lot of cases of them. I do have a few, and the few I have did not involve UFOs. These were things seen out in the wilderness, in Florida Everglades, or and that I started looking them up. I'm like, wow, this is true for a lot of cases. There are some where people said they have seen them on UFOs, but generally no. So the prevailing belief is that these guys are living on our planet and are not extraterrestrials as we would think of it, but rather crypto-terrestrials, more akin to Bigfoot. So I don't know. Yeah, many, many different types. I personally never had an encounter, as far as I know, until I started researching this, and then I did. I started having a lot of...
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it freaked me out.
Any abductions or just seeing stuff in the sky?
Well, possibly. And this is a thing, too, by the way. If you start researching it, they will research you.
Oh, interesting.
I found this out. So what happened to me was in 1992, and this is when I was just in the thick of it. I researched the subject for 10 years, by the way, before I even wrote one book. I wrote a bunch of articles, so I was in the thick of it, interviewing people, staying up all night, talking to my family and friends about it, and that's what had happened. It was July 1992. I'm at my brother's house, Mark, who'd seen a UFO, and his wife, who'd seen aliens. And I'm like, I got to go home. I've got to work tomorrow. And I'm driving home. This is in Woodland Hills here in Southern California. It's a densely populated suburb. I'd just left their house. I was maybe 3 minutes away, coming around this corner, which is a hairpin corner. I was driving super slow. It was maybe 3 miles an hour. And I saw something swoop up in the sky towards my car. And my first thought was, it's a bird. And I'm looking up and like, well, it's not a bird. It's glowing, but it's small, whatever it is. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a firecracker. But it wasn't, because this thing came right towards my windshield and stopped right in front of it, a foot away. And it was a orb. It was a globe of light, about the size of bigger than a golf ball, smaller than a tennis ball, somewhere, and soft, white, yellow, sort of stops there, darts back and forth, moves forward, dips down, almost scrapes the cement on the road, and goes straight up. I remember leaning forward and looking up and watching it sort of go straight up into outer space, or so it would seem. And that's what I always told people, that's my sighting, until one person said, well, what happened next? And I'm like, and the truth is I actually forgot about this. I didn't remember this for a couple of months or even longer. I just completely forgot, which sounds incredible, but this is a pattern you see, particularly in abduction missing time cases.
Yep. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and I know myself. I would have turned around and be like, Mark Christie, you're not going to believe this. This thing came up right to my car. I would have driven straight home and wrote it down, because that's, I've seen UFOs since then on 5-10 times.
Wow.
Some really good sightings. Because I'm out there looking for it, by the way. If you want to see a UFO, there are things you can do.
Interesting.
But I think I may have had missing time. I've had no dreams about it. I haven't gone under hypnotic regression, but I don't remember driving home.
Wow.
I don't remember anything except it leaving. So I wonder.
Yeah, so you remember like it leaving, and then you lost all time after that. Yeah, that's interesting. I do want to jump to another topic that you said, which kind of intrigues me as well, is you mentioned when you did out-of-body experiences, there's different levels. There's the darkness, almost human stuff, and there's different levels of the light. Can you talk about that a little bit? Do you believe, are you religious, do you believe there is a heaven and a hell, or do you just think it's kind of we go where our mind tells us we think we should go?
Yeah, I would say the latter. As you think, so you'll attract what you're sort of resonating with. I would not call myself super religious, but I would say I'm more deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
Definitely after you have these experiences, because initially I would go over to what I would call the heavenly realm. And I did see my mother there, and I have seen her many times. Pretty much everyone I've known who's died, including pets.
How have you seen her? Have you seen her as she was as your mother when she was younger? Was she just light or energy, but you just recognized her? How did you see her?
She looks really good.
Okay.
Much younger. I would say she's looked about 25, and she died when she was 49.
Wow.
Which was young, but she had gray hair and wrinkles at that age. No, she looked amazing and glowing with light, as pretty much everyone does. Not always. Some people have a little bit of a hard time and don't necessarily revert back to a young age. But that would be the higher realms. And it's beautiful. It's very much a garden setting, very much like your classic heaven, but undescribably beautiful. I mean, it's really, I could try to describe it, but words would not convey how beautiful it is. But it's very much a natural setting. The lower realms, no, they're very much like Earth. It's often an urban setting. I became interested in it because I was reading all these out-of-body books, and people were talking about how they would go to the hellish realms. And it's kind of always been my MO. I'm like, if they can do it, so can I. And there are all kinds of things you can do. You can visit healing temples, learn about your past lives, go to the Akashic records, or visit the hellish realms. So I became interested in that. And yeah, it's dark, and the people there are having problems. They will not pay attention to you if you try to get their attention. They're very much self-absorbed in their own misery.
One of the people I interviewed was a priest who sees in his sleep people who die suddenly and are stuck between the earthly plane and in between and the light. So are they people that are just mean, miserable people, or are they victims of accidents and they don't even realize that they're dead? Or what are the type of people that are there?
I'd say, yeah, there's variations. Most people are not going to have a problem. They're going to be just fine. I think the people who are going to have a problem are those who are profoundly skeptical of life after death and do not realize they have died. People who are addicted, people who are downright evil, murderers,
sociopaths.
Rapists, victims of sudden trauma. Yeah, you try to get people's attention. And I mean, people will attack you. They will physically attack you. I remember I walked up to one kid because there was a lot of people around me. I'm like, "Are you dead?" And he gave me this look like I was a complete idiot. And he's like, "We all are." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I just wanted to confirm.
Were there pets there? My understanding from talking to the pet mediums and other people is that, unlike humans, pets kind of like leap to the life into the afterlife. It's almost like going to a park, or they'll go happily to somewhere. Did you see animals there, or is it mostly just humans that you saw there?
It's interesting you ask that. Now that you mention it, I have not seen any animals on these lower realms at all.
Yeah, see, that's one of the people I talked to. His name's Rob Guttrow. He's been on a couple shows with me. And his point is that also, like, a lot of people can stay as ghosts, but animals, pets, typically become spirits where they go to that's because they're willing to leave their body behind and happily go into the afterlife. Humans hold on to their physicality, but animals are more willing to leap to the next realm. They don't have the attachments to materialism that we have. So, yeah, something to think about. Maybe I was just curious. I'm not surprised that there weren't many or any animals or pets in that lower realm.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I did pop out of my body once and walking through the house, went out to the front door, and there was these 3 guys there who were earthbound spirits, and they were murderers. I mean, they came in, they looked at me, and I could just tell that these guys were no bad news.
Yeah.
And they came right for me, scared the living daylights out of me, and I went right back into my body. I'm like, no, I'm not dealing with these guys. I'm just not going to.
So, Preston, when your other book is done, please send me an email. We'll get you back on to talk about your next book. But for right now, let's close. Let's talk about where people can get your books and where they can follow you and what you're up to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me on the show, by the way, too. I really appreciate that. I do have a website. It's prestondennett.weebly.com. All my books are there. You can contact me through my website. If a person has a story to share or a question or a comment, I always love hearing from people. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. Got a YouTube channel. I'm putting out my research.
What is that channel called? Is it just Preston Dennett, or what's it called, your channel, if they're going to Google it?
UFOs and the Paranormal, but if you just punch my name in, it should take you right there.
Okay.
My books are available on Amazon and other online retailers and at bookstores.
Audible too, right? You have a lot of, I don't know if all your books are, but a fair amount are on Audible as well. Is that correct?
Yep. I'm trying to get more and more of them. Some of the publishers are dragging their feet. Yeah, I've got a bunch of them out there.
Oh, excellent. So I'll in the short notes, I'll put a link to your 2 most recent books. Thank you so much for your time. I could talk to you because there's all different angles. I would love to talk a whole show about OBEs, the UFO aspect, even the paranormal. So we'd love to hear you when you have your next book done, do a deeper dive into that. But thank you so much for your time tonight. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Hey, my pleasure too. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
So that was Preston Dennett. Looking forward to having Preston back on again. And also a shout out to Sean Sharp. Sean was the very first person to download my ebook, How to Start Your Own Podcast. So thank you, Sean. When you get your first episode up, shoot me an email and I'll give you a plug on the show. And the same goes to anyone else who goes to my website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com. Click the tab that says Buy Ebook. And if you actually go through and follow the steps and set up your own podcast, shoot me an email when you have your first episode done. I will give you a plug on the show. That's a great deal for $5. Can't do better. So download the ebook and good luck.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit afraidofnothingpodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's afraidofnothingpodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.